everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ajayeb and I hope this video finds you well. If you are new to this place, please consider subscribing, and to all my returning subscribers, thank you so much for your support and welcome back. In this video, I have pairs of fragrances that I believe are quite similar. Some of them are actual dupes of the same fragrances, whilst others are, similar in so many aspects. But I'm not going to talk about redundancy today because basically, if you have these fragrances, you are most likely getting something quite redundant. However, I want to find out, or I'm giving you my opinion as to which one is better, and this is simply my, subjective opinion, which the ones that I believe are quite better over the other. So I'm going to start off with the first two, and these are going to be Rasassi's Ebhar and then Cassablanca by Swiss Arabian. These two fragrances are very similar. In my opinion, I think they are about 95% similar, with this one having that Granny Smith apple, which makes it quite crisp and a little tart, while this one is more of a vanilla, fluffy, sort of, creamy vanilla fragrance. However, there is something about these two, that they don't even remind me of each other. They are like dupes of each other, but I think Cassablanca was launched way back before Ebhar. However, if you ask me to choose between these two fragrances, I would easily pick up Ebhar by Rasassi, simply because it's much more fluffier, much more denser, much more of that creamy vanilla, whilst although this one also has vanilla, it has that additional crisp Granny Smith apple, which also makes it quite different, but very, very similar. I think they're about 95% similar, especially at the dry down. But when you first spray it, you get that Granny Smith apple so much, in this one, whilst you don't get it in this one at all, because it is not a note in this one. But to me, if I were supposed to recommend one of these fragrances, I'm just going to say save your money with Cassablanca and go with this one, because you're going to get something much more vanillic, something much more the potency. I think they both have the same sort of, very intense, long lasting beast mode sort of, performance, but there is something much fluffy, much creamy, much more vanillic about this one that I so much prefer. So between these two, this one is my my winner. Next two I'm going to talk about are going to be Ajayeb Dubai Portrait by Lattafa and then Mango Punch by Paris Corner. These are both heavy mango fragrances. They are quite similar, but not like 100%. This one has a slight woody, spicy, oriental touch to it, while this one is basically a sort of green mango, creamy sort of, touch or mango vibes, but they sort of smell, very similar, but not like 100%. However, I love them both, and it's quite difficult for me to choose between these two. But if I'm really pushed, if I didn't have these two and someone just said, I'm going to give you one of these, just choose one, I think I'm going to go with Ajayeb Dubai, simply because this one has something like a slight touch of something quite spicy, quite oriental, it has some, the oud makes it quite different, while this one feels slightly basic, as a mango scent, but this one has a little complexity to it, which I much enjoy. They are both very exotic smelling, but I sort of prefer this slightly over this. One of the most noticeable differences I find between these two is that this one gives more of a mango, like a straight mango realistic sort of touch, but the dry down is so much muskier, whilst this one is like a combination of the mango and then the oud. So I prefer to layer them together, to amp up the mango in this one, although it's still very present. But when you layer these two, it amps up the mango in this one and also tones down on the musky dry down of Mango Punch. So between these two, I love them both, but if you ask me to just choose one, I'll just say go for Ajayeb Dubai Portraits by Lattafa. The next pair I have here are going to be Oudian by Lattafa and then Ameer Oud Intense also by Lattafa. I got this one like a couple of years ago, almost 2 years ago, and this one is like about 2 months, in my collection. Oudian sort of gives me Ameer Oud Intense, but it feels like this is slightly better. It's like much more oriental, much more animalic. It gives me a very sophisticated version of Ameer Oud Intense. Not that this one is not sophisticated. This one is one of the best to come out from Lattafa, but there is something about this that I prefer slightly over Ameer Oud Intense. It's much more animalic, much more of that spicy cardamom or I think it's either cardamom or cinnamon that they put in this one. And this one, you know, has that smoky sort of, you know, nuance, which I feel is a little missing from this, but they give off very similar, you know, feel. But to me, I think I prefer this like a little over Ameer Oud Intense. But I'll give credit to Ameer Oud Intense because it was the one that, you know, we all knew and fell in love with until this one came along. And to me, this one has dethroned Ameer Oud Intense by Latafa for me. But I would say this might not be for everyone, although it will give you the same feel as this. It's much more animalic, much more intense, much more spicy as compared to this. So it depends on what you are looking for. If you are looking for a much spicier version of Ameer Oud, I would say go for Oudian. But to me, between these two, this one wins all day. The next two fragrances I'm going to talk about might be a bit controversial because I know a lot of people love Modex Dough by Afnan. I love this one. Don't ever get me wrong. This one is one of the best to come from Afnan, at least from the ones that I have come across or smelled. And I'm going to compare to La Nuit Pendora by Pendora Saint Paris Corner. Although this one is not like super popular, I got this one about 2 years ago, way before I started my YouTube channel, and I got this about 4 or 3 months ago. And between these two, I prefer this over Modex Dough because this one gives me a more true representation of La Nuit Tresor, but like a lighter version. Although this one gives me similar vibes, there is something about this one which is slightly off. Not like the fragrance is off, but when it comes to the scent profile, I feel like they had a twist of their own on this one, whilst in this one they didn't really add any twist of their own. They just gave us La Nuit by Lancome, but like a lighter version. But this one is much more fluffier. There is a fluff, like an airy fluffiness to this one, which is missing in this one. This gives me much more of an intense fruity berry, strawberry, you know. It's supposed to have chocolate. I don't get much of that chocolate, but it's a very beautiful and excellent fragrance. But that sort of fluffy creaminess this one has sort of gives it a little edge over this to me. However, if I want to treat this one as a fragrance on its own, I think it's an excellent fragrance. It's a 10 over 10 on its own. I think people have said it's a combination of La Nuit Tresor, à la Folie, and something else, you know. And honestly, this is a very beautiful one. But if you ask me to choose between these two, I'm going to choose this one. And also because this one is like so much cheaper. This one has also gone down considerably in price, but this one you can get for about $12, you know. I think that is how much I got it some few years ago when I got this one, whilst this one is around the $30 mark. So depending on your pocket and which ones are available, I would say just go with the flow. But for me, I would just recommend this one over Modex Dough. Although this one is still a 10 over 10 to me, I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm still going to maintain it. I utilize it. I love it. I got compliments on it, but I prefer this slightly over that. The next two fragrances I have here are going to be Sweet Tooth by Sabrina Carpenter and then Caramel Cascade by Paris Corner. Yes, these two smell so much alike, at least to me. They smell so much alike, just that this one is much more fluffy marshmallow whipped cream, whilst this one is more of a lactonic caramel milky, you know, nuance. However, they come across as very similar, and to me, although they are not like 100% or one-to-one sort of, you know, comparison I can make with this one, Sabrina Carpenter's own really remind me of that. I remember when I got this one at first, I had already had my sample of Bianco Latte, and as soon as I sprayed this one, it immediately reminded me of Bianco Latte. And when I got this one, I was like, you know what, yes, they are all in the same sort of family, just that this one is much more milky with much more caramel, whilst this one you don't get caramel, but you get the same sort of, you know, scent profile or scent DNA with marshmallowy whipped cream, you know, attached to this, to Sabrina Carpenter's fragrance. They are both very beautiful. I think they're about 85% similar, and in this situation, I think I'm not going to say I prefer one over the other because they're not like 100% duping the same thing. I don't know if this was supposed to be a dupe for Bianco Latte, but I think this one was up before Bianco Latte. This one was, I think, launched way a little before Bianco Latte. However, The scent profile is very similar to me, just that it's much, this one in Bianco Latte is much more of that caramel condensed milk vibes, whilst this one missed that, you know, condensed milk lactonic touch. However, I think I might go with this one just because it's slightly much more intense than Sweet Tooth. This one is more of a skin scent, but it's also, you know, it's after putting it down for some time, it's gaining, you know, the performance, the projection, but it still doesn't fill up any room. It's quite like a bedtime sort of, you know, cozy feel, whilst this one is more of a dressed up version. I would just put it that way. So this one is like a much more dressed up version, while this one is like the stay at home, much more calmer, you know, junior sister to this one. But I love them both. So these are Sabrina Carpenter's Sweet Tooth and then Caramel Cascade. So I would say this one wins slightly over this one. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on the next pair because I think I've already let my opinion out about how I feel about Qawah and then the OG Khamrah. And I've always said I prefer this slightly over the OG Khamrah, you know, but I'll give credit to Khamrah because, you know, it has served us, a lot of us, so well. However, because of that touch of coffee in this one, I sort of, you know, it gives it a sort of a little edge over the OG Khamrah, you know, and I sort of prefer that sort of rendition. It is much more sexier in my opinion. It's much more unisex in my opinion. It's much more stronger and sweeter in my opinion. I love them both. I would never, you know, discredit the OG Khamrah because this one has been one of the greatest to come out from any Middle Eastern house, so I'll give the credit to it. So personally, I'm going to choose the Khamrah Qawah over the OG Khamrah, you know. But for me, one of the things I love to do with these two is to combine them together, you know. They give up very similar, but still the differences are very also clear to me. So this is Khamrah Qawah and then OG Khamrah. The next pair I have here are supposed to be clones of Initio's Max Therapy. I have a decant of Max Therapy and I've been able to compare it to Infini Musk by Alhambra, which I feel is a very good or almost an accurate clone. However, Max is Great by Mayar has also been marketed as a clone to Max Therapy, but I'm struggling to sort of, you know, agree to that. These two are not the same, you know, scent profile. This one is much more fruity, musky, and this I still am struggling to describe this scent. Honestly, it comes across as musky, a bit fresh, like dryer sheet sort of, you know, feel, and I can't really say these smell about 80-90% similar. I think they're about maybe at most 50% similar to me, but this is a true representation of Max Therapy. Whilst this one, although being marketed as a dupe for Max Therapy, I don't really find it as that similar. So because of those reasons, I'm going to choose this, you know, like this one is the better version. I prefer this over this, you know. I've been told to let this one sit for a year. I think I'm about 4 months about 4 months in now, so I'm really waiting on this one for 1 year to macerate to see how I truly feel about this one. But for now, it's macerated for about 4 months. I think it's gotten so much better, but even in its current state, I still don't know how really I feel about it. I know I do not really like it. It smells like back spray to me, and that sort of back spray essence I used to have is gone down significantly, but I still sort of, you know, get it. However, between these two, I would say save your money on this one if you don't, you know, you are looking for a Max Therapy dupe, and go for this one because this one will give you about 94-95% similar to Initio's version. I love this. It's very demure, very gentle, you know, simple, sort of bedtime scent to me. It's not something that I'll grab when I'm sort of, you know, going out and want to feel sexy, but I still love this one, you know, and I'll say go for this one over Mass is Great by Mayar. So these are the two that I have when it comes to an Initio dupe, but I don't think this one is a great dupe. Probably something else, but not, to me, not an Initio Max Therapy dupe. So go for this over that. The next pair I have here are going to be Alive Now by Maison Alhambra and then Mayar by Latafa. These two have been reported to be dupes for Angel Nova. I love these two. Honestly, I love both of these fragrances. This feels much more thicker, much more dense, whilst this one is much more effervescent and a little green. I don't get that greenness. Just a slight greenness in this one, but this one is much more greener, much more effervescent, whilst this one is much more intense, much more denser than this one, but they give off very similar vibes. I think they're about, these two are about 95% similar, both supposedly duping Angel Nova by Mugler. I love them both, honestly. I got this one first, and then I grabbed this, you know, version because this was compared to oh, I'll put the fragrance up there. I was compared to that, and I wanted to be sure because I got that fragrance. I got a decant of that fragrance too, and I wanted to compare. So I got it, and I would say it gives me similar vibes, but not necessarily the same thing. You know, however, you know, if you want to, what's the name of the fragrance? I think I'll look for it and put it somewhere here. Pink Me Up, you know, Pink Me Up. You know, I think I've done the comparison, and I'll link it in the description if you have not seen it. It gives me similar vibes, especially at the opening, but the dry down takes like slightly different turns, whilst I feel like Mayar by Lattafa sort of gives me a much closer interpretation, or a much closer sort of, you know, clonish sort of version of Pink Me Up, you know, but they are supposedly clones of Mugler's Angel Nova. Between these two, I think I'm just going to go with Alive Now by Khamrah. You know, sometimes I guess change my mind about these two. 1 minute I'm sort of liking this a little better, another minute I'm sort of liking this one better, but to me I think they are both excellent. But if you ask me right now, I'll say go for Alive Now over just over this one, simply because this one is much more intense, much more denser, whilst this one is much more effervescent and a little greener than Alive Now by Maison Khamrah. The next pair I have here are going to be dupes of Guy Made, which I don't have an idea how that smells, but about a year ago I was able to get Celestial by Paris Corner, which I love. And then during the Christmas period I got myself Masa from Lattafa, and these two are supposedly duping Guy Made, which I have not tried before. However, when I first received Masa, honestly I was really disappointed, you know, on so many levels, because it was very plasticky, very synthetic. If you have observed me on this channel, you would notice that it's been on my shelf for about 4 months. I've not even spoken about it, or about 3 months, and I've not even spoken about it because I was finding it difficult to, you know, give a very subjective, you know, review about this fragrance without sounding negative. So I decided to let it sit for some time because I know people have spoken highly about this, but this one was love at first sniff to me. I loved it from day one, and they are honestly very similar. However, this has the touch of mango scent in it, with that sort of, you know, metallic sort of vibes, you know, like aquatic, metallic, plasticky sort of vibes. They both share, you know, very similar DNA, but I think because of the additional mango in this one, it takes a slightly different, you know, turn as compared to this. However, in the air they smell about 90%, you know, similar. With all that I have said about Masa, currently I think I'm going 360 to what I initially thought about it. I absolutely love this one, you know. It's much more creamier. I get a bit of the mango. It's not like a prominent mango, but you still get that slight creamy mango nuance in this one. Whilst in Celestial, mango is not, you know, in the nose structure. You don't get any mango. Among all the pairs that I'm talking today, this pair is the only pair that I will not be able to say go for this over that or this over that. Honestly, just because I used to love this one, I used to hate this one, but after about 4 months in my collection, I'm really loving this, you know, this one because of that creamy mango nuance in it, you know, and I'm finding it very difficult to choose which one, you know, I would recommend over the other. So I would say if you want something that Guy Made DNA with a slight fruity nuance, then you go for this. But if you want the classic Guy Made fragrance, then you go for Celestial by Paris Corner. So with these two, unfortunately, I'll not be able to say choose one over the other. So that is it for Masa and then Celestial by Paris Corner. The next pair I have here are going to be Orientica's Royal Blue. I have just a 15 ml here, and then Loyal Agar by Luxudor here. These are both supposedly dupes for Layton by Parfum de Mali, and honestly I've had this the longest. I've had this for about 3 or so months. This is much more smoother, much more of a better blend, much more close to Layton in my opinion. This one gives me Layton, but I think it's about 90% similar, whilst this one is about 98% similar. This one gives me a much smoother, like a very much smoother version of this. There's something slightly off, once I got to get this one, I realized there's something slightly off about this one, although it gives you the same sort of vibes or the same DNA, but I much prefer Royal Blue by Orientica. So if you're looking for an accurate 100% dupe for Layton, I would say go for Royal Blue by Orientica. I love this one, but I guess that it has the typical masculine DNA, which I enjoy on men. So these are for my men. You can go either way, but because this one is much more expensive, and I think these two are both quite expensive on when it comes to dupe houses, Luxudor and then Orientica. But if you ask me, for my opinion, I would say go for Royal Blue by Orientica. The next pair I'm going to share with you are going to be French Coffee by Al Rehab and then Eternal Coffee by Paris Corner. When it comes to these two, they are quite similar or very similar, but I find this one much more floral, whilst this one is not floral at all. This one is like a realistic cappuccino scent, whilst this one is more of a milky, coconutty, latte sort of vibes, but they give off very similar vibes, and I sort of prefer this slightly over this because I don't really pull for this one that much, even with these two fragrances. Nowadays, I don't pull for them much and I prefer to layer them. However, if I want a realistic coffee scent, I would say, or if you want a realistic coffee scent, I would say go for this one because this one seems much more smoother, much more sweeter, much more coffee. Although this one is also a very realistic coffee scent, is boxed with some floral nuances, which makes it slightly different and much more lighter as a coffee scent, because of the florals and the coconut milk sort of nuance it has in this one. But this one is like a straight up cappuccino, straight up coffee scent with some chocolatey sort of vibes. That is what I get in this one. So between these two, I'm just going to say I prefer this over that. The next two fragrances I'm going to discuss are going to be Watani Intense by Al Watania and then Oud Al Layl by My Perfumes Abeyedh. These fragrances are very similar. They're about 90% similar. They give off this very oriental oudi rose oud combo with some heavy presence of a candied rose, with some sugary sort of nuances. That is what these two give me. They are very similar. However, Al Watania is much more fruiter. To me, it's much of a better blended version of Oud Al Layl. It's got a much intense fruity vibes, to it, whilst this one lacks that fruity touch that this one has. So because of that reason, I prefer Al Watania's version to Oud Al Layl by My Perfume Abeyedh. This one feels slightly screechy, whilst this one is like a more polished, sister to this one. In the same breath, I also feel like this one feels a little more masculine leaning, whilst this one I'll consider like a feminine version of Oud Al Layl. They are both very unisex, fragrances in my opinion. But when you put these two side by side, I feel like this one can easily be a his version and this can easily also be a hers version. So these two are very beautiful Oriental Middle Eastern type fragrances. If you want quintessential Arabian Dubai fragrance DNA, these two will give you that, and they are super long lasting. But this one is much more fruity, much more creamier, much more of a better blend as compared to Oud Al Layl by My Perfume Abeyedh. These next two are going to be body mist, but I find them very similar because they give me this very battery, vanilla, macadamia vibes, and these are going to be Cheriosa 71 and then Bath and Body Works Sugared Snockerdoddle, by Bath and Body Works. I'm not sure if Cheriosa 71 is supposed to be a dupe for anything, because from when I got to know this, it's always been marketed as a standalone fragrance. However, I feel like Sugared Snockerdoddle by Bath and Body Works is a very accurate clone of this one. It gives me very similar vibes. They have the same sort of performance, the same sort of potency. The only difference I find between these two is that I feel like this one is much more intense when it comes to the macadamia and that buttery, you know, sort of vibes, whilst this one is less intense, you know, just a little less intense, but it still gives you like 90%, you know, or 95% Cheriosa 71. They are very, very similar, but I feel like this one is much more intense. If you are going according to price and you want to save some coins, I would say go for this. But I mean, this one is not super expensive, you know, so if you want the real thing, go for the original Cheriosa 71. But if you're on a budget and you still want to know how this one smells, I think this is a very good alternative. But personally, I prefer, no, I don't know, but maybe this slightly better because it's much more intense and is the OG version, while this one is sort of, you know, the dupe. But if you're on a budget, I would say go for this one. But if you want a real thing, why not? I love this. I love both of these fragrances. So these are Cheriosa 71 and then Bath and Body Works Bath and Body Works Sugared Snooker Bath and Body Works Sugared Snockerdoddle. I'm Ghanaian. Okay. The next pair I'm going to talk about here are going to be Khair Pistachio by Paris Corner. I don't have a full bottle. And then there's one called Forever Blue by Ad Azafran, which I've tried and I actually love. You know, I prefer Forever Blue by Ad Azafran over Khair Pistachio, because you know, the more I try this one, the more it gives me something like if you've gone to the market, you know, like a typical Makola market or, you know, Malata market, and you know the traders who sell beans or maize and they are sort of sieving it, or, you know, if it's like the maize has been stored for quite a long time and it feels like there are some weevils in the maize and they are sort of sieving it, and you smell that sort of, you know, powdery sort of, you know, thing that comes out of the maize or the wheat. That sort of dusty sort of, you know, maize, no, that you are sort of sieving. That is the vibe I get from Khair Pistachio. Honestly, there's something about it which really doesn't really sit well with me. To be fair to Khair Pistachio, I don't hate this fragrance, honestly, but there is something about the dry down that goes very green, very dusty sort of, you know, feel to me. I don't get much of any delicious gourmand pistachio sort of feel. It doesn't come across like in that, like what people have, you know, described it over the last couple of months to me. I don't really get it. It's not bad, but it's not a scent profile that I think I'll get up one day and say I'm in the mood for this. Somehow I prefer the original Yam Pistachio to Khair Pistachio. I think there's something that is a little off when it comes to this, you know. It gives me that sort of, you know, dusty sort of, you know, sieved, you know, beans or maize. There's something about it which feels dusty, which is a little more soapy. I just don't know how I feel about it, but I know I don't love it, you know. But when I tried Forever Blue by Ad Azafran, it didn't give me that. It didn't give me that sort of, you know, dusty quality. It wasn't overly soapy. It wasn't overly green. I sort of got much more of that creamy creaminess that the OG version has. I sort of got that sort of a touch of that ice cream sort of vibes that the OG has. But this one, I don't think so, you know. I don't think so. I like it, but I would personally not recommend it. The next two fragrances that I'm going to discuss are going to be Fleur de Orientica by Orientica and then Nacortic Fleur by Maison Alhambra. I had that in my collection. I exhausted that fragrance about a year ago, and I knew this one was supposed to be a clone of Fleur Nacortic, and Nacortic Fleur is also a clone of Fleur Nacortic, you know. So I wanted something different. I didn't want to repeat the same thing. I went for this one, and honestly, I love this scent. You know, it's like a peached iced tea, you know, very aquatic, sort of dryer sheet feel, musky. I love this one. However, to me, The only reason why I would choose Nacortic Fleur Nacortic Fleur by Khamrah over this is the price. Nacortic Fleur is considerably cheaper than this one, and honestly they give off the same vibes, the same smell, the same touch, just that this one is slightly musky, but they give me the same Fleur Nacortic vibes. However, when it comes to these two, I feel like Nacortic Fleur is less expensive, gives me the same vibes. It is a great, blend, just like this one. They are both like phenomenal dupes for Fleur Nacortic, but if I'm comparing price points, I'm going to go with Nacortic Fleur. So if I should ever run out of this one, I don't think I might repurchase this one. I might go for the Nacortic Fleur simply because of the price, because these two give me the same scent profile, the same feel, the same experience, just that this one is much more expensive. And I also just like the bottle of this one better than the Khamrah version. Aside the bottle, I think price points and performance and scent wise, I'm just going to go with Khamrah's version. So these are the two that I have when it comes to Orientica and then Khamrah. The next two I'm going to talk about, I don't think anybody has done that comparison or has even spoken about the fact that Devotion by D&G and then Orientica's Melodia smell alike. That has been marketed as a dupe for Memo Centra. I think that is the name of the fragrance that people have always associated Orientica's Melodia to. However, to me, Melodia and then D&G's Devotion are like 95% accurate. When you take the initial opening of Orientica's Melodia, which is quite abrasive, quite harsh, it gives me something very harsh. I don't like the opening of that fragrance at all. However, when you give it like 10 minutes for it to begin to settle, it gives me like D&G Devotion about 95-100% accurate dupe. Apparently I think that is supposed to be a dupe for Memo Centra. If I'm not mistaken, I'll put whatever is supposed to dupe up somewhere, but nobody has made the connection to Devotion and that fragrance. I've not seen it anywhere. I smelt it, a friend wore it. As soon as I smelled it, I felt like she was wearing this particular fragrance, and for some reason, I don't know what happened. I asked her and she said no, she wasn't wearing this one, and I was so surprised. The only difference I find between this and then Melodia is that one is so much intense, much more stronger. The note structures do not match at all. However, the scent profile, they are about 98% similar, especially when Melodia begins to smoothing up after the initial very aggressive sort of opening, which I do not like. But when that first 10 minutes passes by, and then the real essence of the fragrance begin to shine through, it gives me D&G Devotion like 100%. There is nothing that will tell me they are not dupes. I don't know who took inspiration from who, but whichever one came first took inspiration from the other, and I think this one took inspiration from that or something else. But to me, I find a great resemblance between those two fragrances. So if you have them, and I believe a lot of my niche designer girls have Melodia, and then Devotion, just try the two and let me know what you think. How accurate do you think they are? Just compare the two and let me know what you think. Between those two, however, I think I prefer D&G just because of the opening of the Orientica version. The opening I do not like, but the dried out is very beautiful. There is no screechy, abrasive sort of touch to it. If you put the opening aside, they are both like at par, but because of the opening of that fragrance, I'm going to choose this over that. The next pair I'm going to talk about are going to be Royal Amber by Orientica and then I Am White by Lattafa. These two are supposed to be dupes for Ebhar Pura, that sort of keki Ebhar Pura DNA. I get it from these two. However, I find this one of a better blend than this This one feels much more fresher. I am white, while this one is more vanillic, and for some reason I sort of prefer this, you know, over this particular one. I don't like the blend of this. I guess feel like it wasn't better, or it wasn't blended so well, you know. However, when I tried this, you know, I would rather pick a bottle of this than getting a full bottle of I Am White by Lattafa. I've had it for over 2 years. I still have barely, you know, utilized this fragrance just because I do not like it that much. But if I were to have a bigger bottle of this, I think I would utilize this, simply because I prefer the much more vanillic, much more better blend, much more fruitier sort of, you know, vibes this one has over the I Am White by Lattafa. So between these two, this is my preference. And the last pair I'm going to share are going to be Yara by Lattafa and then Hayaati Rose by Fragrance World, you know. So Hayaati Rose is supposedly a dupe for Yara by Lattafa. I had that one. I've not necessarily decluttered it. I gave it to my mom who wanted that fragrance, you know, and I still have this one because my daughter uses Yara, you know. She loves this one because it's much more younger and a bit juvenile and soft, so she prefers this one, you know. And I gave the rose Hayaati Rose to my mom because she also loved that one. That one is much more fruitier to me. It feels like a fruitier version of Yara. It's a little better in performance, you know, and projection than this one to me. So personally, I prefer Hayaati Rose over Yara. You know, Yara, I've had this relationship with that. Anytime I talk about Yara, I feel somehow bad about the fact that a lot of people love this one and it didn't really work for me. I don't hate the scent profile. I guess feel like it was overhyped in some way, but I sort of prefer the Hayaati Rose version of Yara to the OG Yara. So if you ask me between those two, and I think that one is even much cheaper than the original Yara. Even currently, Yara is still about 20 something, whilst the Hayaati Rose, from where I normally get my fragrances, you can get it for about $15-12, you know. So if you're looking for, you know, a cheaper alternative, I would say go for Hayaati Rose by Fragrance World. And to me, it smells so much better than this one because it performs slightly better. So these are the fragrances I have today. I'm sort of compiling other, you know, similar but better list. If you want something for me to compare, you can just let me know in the comment section. These are just, you know, my subjective, you know, opinion. That is how I feel about these fragrances. I have all of these in my collection. I love them, you know. I love them. That is why I still have them. However, I guess feel like some of them are quite, you know, better quality, quite better smelling, performance, you know, blah blah, over the others. That is why I chose them over their similar counterparts. So that is all I have for you today, and I hope this video found you well. Please do not forget to give this video a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in my next one. Take care. Bye bye.